December 2024, Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, California. 127 consecutive misses. $2.4 million in wasted ammunition. 6 Elite Force Recon Marines staring down the barrel of career destruction. 48 hours until deployment to Syria. 48 hours to prove they deserved the title they wore. 48 hours before the 2nd Battalion would take their place and their pride. The cleaning lady they were about to scream at. She was the most lethal operator in United States intelligence. She had been invisible for 22 months, and in the next 12 hours she would risk everything she had built to save warriors who would never know her real name. Every shot tells a story. This one would tell 3, and it would be classified for the next 30 years. The morning sun broke over the Sierra Nevada range like a copper blade slicing through mountain shadows and thin high-altitude air. At 8,500 feet, the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center sprawled across terrain that had broken lesser men. The wind here moved in layers, invisible rivers of air that carried secrets only the mountains knew. Thermal currents rose from sun-baked granite. Pressure systems collided where valleys met peaks. And somewhere in that chaos, 6 Marines were learning the difference between technology and truth. Shot number 127 left the barrel of a Barrett M82 rifle with a sound like thunder cracking stone. 1,700 yards downrange, the steel target remained silent, untouched, mocking. Gunnery Sergeant Victor Kane stood behind the firing line, his jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. 45 years old, 20 years in the Corps. 3 combat deployments, 2 Afghanistan tours, 1 Syria rotation that still woke him at 3 in the morning with the smell of burning metal in his nose. He was 6 feet 2 inches of scar tissue and suppressed rage watching his career evaporate like morning dew under a desert sun. Windage correction -2.3. Staff Sergeant Harper Donovan called from behind her spotting scope, voice tight with frustration. 32 years old, a mother of 2 breadwinner for a family that depended on her making Sergeant First Class. The promotion board convened in 6 weeks. You couldn't make Sergeant First Class when your team failed basic qualification. Corporal Ethan Whitaker worked the bolt on his rifle, chambering the next round with hands that trembled despite his best efforts to steady them. 24 years old, the youngest on the team. The kid who grew up in foster homes and found family in the Corps. The Marine who had something to prove to ghosts that would never stop watching. Barometric pressure verified, Whitaker said, consulting the ballistic computer strapped to his wrist. The device cost $18,000. It could calculate firing solutions faster than most people could think. It measured wind speed, air density, temperature gradients, even the Coriolis effect of the Earth's rotation. Range confirmed at 1,700 yards. Solution should be perfect. Should be. Sergeant Garrett Cole lowered his own rifle, staring at the high-tech equipment with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for used car salesmen. 29 years old. The best marksman on the team until this morning. The Marine trying to rebuild a career after a friendly fire incident in 2021 that wasn't his fault but felt like it anyway. Cleared by every investigation. Haunted by every nightmare. This is the 5th time the computer says perfect solution, Cole muttered. 5 perfect solutions, 5 misses. Master Sergeant Frank Dawson approached the firing line with a clipboard thick enough to be a weapon. 48 years old, 28 years in the Corps, range master at MCMWTC for the last 6 years. He had seen thousands of Marines qualify on this range. He had never seen failure like this. Gentlemen, Dawson said, his voice carrying the weight of bad news delivered too many times. I need to remind you that this qualification cannot be postponed. The deployment schedule is non-negotiable. If this team fails to qualify by 1,800 hours tomorrow, replacement Marines will be selected from 2nd Battalion. The words landed like artillery rounds. 2nd Battalion was good. 2nd Battalion trained hard. But 2nd Battalion wasn't Force Recon. 2nd Battalion wasn't the elite of the elite, the tip of the spear. The warriors who went where others couldn't and did what others wouldn't. For these 6 Marines, failure here meant more than professional embarrassment. It meant the end of everything they had worked toward, everything they had sacrificed for, everything they were. Kane felt his hands curl into fists. His voice, when it came, was a barely controlled growl. We've got the best equipment money can buy, the best training the Corps can provide, the best Marines in the world, and we can't hit a stationary target. The range stretched before them like an accusation. From the firing line at 0 yards, the terrain rolled and climbed through sagebrush and granite outcroppings. Wind flags marked distances at 400, 800, 1,200, and 1,500 yards. The primary target stood at 1,700 yards, a steel plate 18 inches in diameter that should have been singing with bullet impacts by now. But the wind flags told lies this morning, or rather, they told only part of the truth. Behind the safety barrier, 60 yards from the firing line, a woman in a faded khaki maintenance uniform knelt beside a bed of roses. The name tape on her chest read J. Blackwell in block letters. She was maybe 5'4", perhaps 130 pounds. The kind of woman you could pass on the street and never remember 5 minutes later. Her steel-toed boots were scuffed from years of walking perimeters. Her uniform had been washed so many times the color had faded from tan to something closer to gray. She deadheaded a wilted rose with practiced efficiency, dropping the spent bloom into a small bucket at her side. Her movements were methodical, unremarkable, the movements of someone who had performed the same task 1,000 times before. But her eyes never stopped moving. Jordan Blackwell was 38 years old. She had been Specialist Blackwell, then Agent Blackwell, then a dozen other names in a dozen other places. For the last 22 months, she had been J. Blackwell, GS-7 Maintenance Specialist assigned to groundskeeping duties at Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center. 22 months of invisibility, 22 months of watching, 22 months of Operation Nightingale, a deep cover assessment mission that had taken her from Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters in Washington to this windswept mountain range in California. She studied the wind flags at 800 yards, then the grass movement at 1,000. Then the heat shimmer rising from the granite outcropping at 1,500. Her brain processed the information in layers, building a three-dimensional map of air currents that no computer could see and no technology could measure. Thermal inversion at 900 yards. Mid-level crosswind at 1,200 flowing opposite to surface wind. Pressure differential where the valley narrowed at 1,400. The same conditions that had killed her brother. August 2015. Afghanistan, Corporal Brennan Blackwell, 22 years old, bright-eyed and full of fire. Bad wind call from his spotter. Thermal inversion the computer couldn't predict. A bullet that drifted 18 inches right. An insurgent sniper who didn't miss his return shot. Last words over the radio, Jordan, tell Mom I. Then static. Then silence. Then a flag-draped coffin in a folded triangle of fabric that their mother still kept on the mantel. Jordan's hands stilled on the roses, her jaw tightened. 9 years later, and the rage still burned cold and clean. She watched Whitaker chamber another round, watched him consult his ballistic computer, watched him trust the machine instead of his eyes. She had been 29 when Brennan died. She had been a mid-level DIA analyst, then good at her job, but not great competent, but not exceptional. His death had changed something fundamental in her DNA. Within 6 months, she had applied for field operations training. Within a year, she was in advanced reconnaissance school. Within 2 years, she was doing things that officially never happened in places that officially didn't exist. 18 years of service now. 63 classified missions. 12 countries. Navy SEAL Development Group Precision Marksmanship Program, the only female graduate in the program's history. 42 confirmed kills, though that number existed only in files that would be destroyed when she died. And for 22 months, she had been invisible, a ghost in plain sight. Trimming roses and emptying trash cans, and cleaning bathrooms while watching Force Recon teams train. Assessing readiness, identifying vulnerabilities, looking for the cracks in the armor that enemies might exploit. The mission had been perfect. Until this morning when watching good Marines fail because of bad training became more than she could bear. Shot number 128 missed by 4 minutes of angle, over 6 feet at this range. Kane's voice exploded across the range like a fragmentation grenade. Check that scope, check the mounting. Someone explained to me how we can be this far off with equipment this good. Harper bent over her spotting scope, frustration etched in every line of her face. 2 kids at home, 7-year-old Emma, who wanted to be a Marine like Mommy, 5-year-old Jake, who still cried at night when she was deployed. Their father had left 3 years ago, unable to handle the stress of being a military spouse. Harper was mother and father now's provider and protector, and she needed this deployment bonus to keep the lights on. The Mirage pattern is running left to right at 1,000 yards. She said, her voice steady despite everything. But the flags at 1,500 are showing completely different wind direction. Computer says, hold 2.3 minutes left, Whitaker added, studying his wrist-mounted ballistic calculator. But every shot is going 4 minutes right of center. Cole set down his rifle and actually looked at the environment instead of the equipment. For the first time all morning, he began to see what the machines couldn't tell him. The flags showed one story, but the grass, the dust, the heat shimmer rising from sun-baked stone, they told another story entirely. Something's not right, Cole said quietly. The wind shouldn't be doing this. Jordan stood slowly, her movements deliberate and careful. She walked toward the range office, ostensibly to check the maintenance schedule posted on the bulletin board. Her path took her close enough to the firing line to hear the technical discussions, close enough to understand exactly what was going wrong. She paused, pretending to read the work schedule. Her internal monologue ran cold calculations. The mission was observation. The mission was assessment. The mission was remaining invisible until Operation Nightingale concluded in 6 weeks. But the mission had never included watching warriors die because no one taught them to see. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the mountain breeze. "I don't mean to interrupt." Every head on the firing line turned. 6 Marines and 1 range master, all staring at the cleaning lady who had just stepped across an invisible line between their world and hers. Kane's face darkened like a thunderhead. His voice, when it came, could have stripped paint. "Ma'am, this is a restricted training area. Civilians need to maintain a safe distance from active firing operations." Jordan met his eyes without flinching. 38 years old, and she had stared down warlords, drug cartel enforcers, and foreign intelligence operatives who would have killed her without hesitation. An angry Marine gunnery sergeant didn't register on that scale. "I understand gunny," she replied, using the familiar term with natural ease. "I just thought you might want to know that your wind readings are being affected by thermal inversion." The silence that followed was absolute. Harper's hands stilled on her spotting scope. Whitaker's head came up from his ballistic computer. Cole actually lowered his rifle to stare at this maintenance worker who had just used a term most civilians had never heard. "Thermal inversion," Dawson repeated slowly, walking closer to the safety barrier. "Ma'am, what exactly do you know about long-range ballistics?" Jordan shrugged, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed both humility and confidence. The kind of movement that spoke of training so deep it had become instinct. "I just noticed things," she said. "The flags at 800 yards are showing one wind pattern. But if you look at the grass on that ridge at 1,000 yards, it's bending the opposite direction. The hot air rising from those rocks is creating a rolling current that reverses direction about every 45 seconds. Kane felt his professional pride ignite like thermite. This woman, this janitor, was lecturing him about marksmanship in front of his Marines, in front of men and women who looked to him for leadership, in front of warriors whose careers depended on his expertise. "Listen, lady," he said, stepping forward and using his 6'2" frame to crowd her space. "I appreciate your observations, but we have actual scientific equipment here, computers that cost more than most people make in a year. We don't need folk wisdom about grass bending." Jordan didn't step back, didn't blink. Something shifted in her pale green eyes. Something that had been hidden for 22 months. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. "Your equipment is reading surface wind," she said, her voice still quiet but carrying an edge now, a blade wrapped in silk. "But bullets fly through 3 dimensions. Your computer can't see the layers, can't measure them, can't account for them." Whitaker lowered his scope and actually looked where she was pointing. For the first time all morning, he began to see what she was describing. The flags at different distances weren't just showing different wind speeds. They were showing wind moving in different directions entirely. "Holy," Whitaker breathed. "She's right. Look at the mirage patterns. They're flowing in completely different directions at different distances." Harper raised her spotting scope, following Jordan's guidance. What she saw made her breath catch. The thermal layer was definitely moving opposite to the surface wind. How had they missed that? How had 20 years of combined experience and $18,000 in ballistic computers failed to see what was right there in front of them? "Because you're looking at data instead of reading the environment," Jordan said, as if she had heard the unspoken question. "Your computers can calculate theoretical ballistics, but they can't feel the mountain breathing." Cole had his spotting scope up now, tracking the grass movement with the intensity of a predator stalking prey. 47 seconds. The grass stilled for maybe 2 seconds. Then the cycle began again. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "It's like clockwork." Kane felt control of the situation slipping through his fingers like water. This civilian was making his Marines question their training, question their equipment, question their methods. And the worst part, the absolutely unforgivable part, was that she might be right. He felt something crack inside his chest. A memory he had spent 3 years trying to bury. Syria 2021. His team in Overwatch position. 2 insurgent fighters at 900 yards. Computer-calculated wind solution. Perfect setup. And then the wind had shifted. The bullet had drifted. And instead of insurgents, his round had impacted 30 feet from a Marine patrol he hadn't known was there. No casualties, thank God. But the investigation, the questions, the knowledge that he had almost killed his own. He had trusted the computer then too, had believed in technology over instinct, and he had nearly destroyed everything. Now this woman was showing him the same mistake, the same fatal flaw, and his ego couldn't handle it. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "I'm going to have to insist that you return to your duties and allow my Marines to complete their training without interference." Jordan studied him for a long moment. She saw the fear beneath the anger, the shame beneath the pride, the wounded warrior trying to protect his tribe the only way he knew how. She could walk away, should walk away. Operation Nightingale had 6 weeks remaining. Her cover was intact. Walking away was the professional choice, the smart choice. The choice that kept her invisible and safe and able to complete the mission. But she thought of Brennan, 22 years old and full of life, trusting a computer that couldn't see thermal inversions, trusting technology that had failed him when he needed it most. She couldn't watch it happen again. "Of course, Gunny," she said, stepping back from the barrier. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." But as she turned to walk away, Harper called after her. "Wait, you said you could hit at all 3 targets with 1 shot. What did you mean by that?" Jordan paused, turned back, and smiled a small, enigmatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ricochet ballistics," she said simply. "If you understand the angles and the target materials, one properly placed shot can create a chain reaction." The Marines stared at her in stunned silence. Ricochet ballistics was an advanced military science studied by special operations units and classified research programs. It involved calculating bullet trajectory, target surface hardness, angle of incidence, and deflection vectors. It was physics and geometry and instinct all rolled into split-second decisions. It was the kind of skill that took years to develop and a lifetime to master. It wasn't something you learned from trimming roses. Dawson's voice took on a more formal tone. "Ma'am, I think we need to continue this conversation. Would you mind if I asked to see some identification?" For just a moment, something flickered across Jordan's features, not fear, calculation. Like a chess player suddenly realizing the game had changed, that the move she was about to make would cascade into consequences she couldn't control. She reached into her pocket and produced a standard contractor ID badge. Jordan Blackwell, GS7 Maintenance Specialist. The photo showed a woman with tired eyes and a half-smile. The clearance indicators were appropriate for someone who cleaned bathrooms and trimmed hedges. Everything about it was legitimate. Everything about it was a lie. "I've been working on base for 22 months, she said. "Groundskeeping and facilities maintenance." Dawson examined the ID carefully. It looked perfect because it was perfect. Defense Intelligence Agency legend building was an art form, but something about the whole situation felt wrong, felt off. Felt like there was a story here that extended far beyond wind reading and thermal inversions. 22 months, Dawson repeated slowly. "And in that time, you've developed expertise in advanced ballistics." "I read a lot," Jordan replied with a shrug. "And I watch. You'd be surprised what you can learn just by paying attention." Meanwhile, Whitaker had been thinking about what she'd said regarding wind patterns. Against Kane's obvious disapproval, he began timing the thermal cycles she had described. After watching for 90 seconds, he could see the patterns she had identified. The grass movement, the mirage distortion, the way the air seemed to pulse like a living thing. "Gunny," he said quietly, his voice carrying a note of certainty that hadn't been there before. "I think she's right about the wind cycles. I can see the pattern now." Corporal Whitaker, Kane snapped his control, fraying at the edges. "You will not adjust your firing solution based on advice from a civilian contractor." But Harper had also been watching, and she was seeing the same thing Whitaker had observed. The mirage pattern definitely cycled every 48 seconds, and there was definitely a brief moment where the chaotic layers aligned into something predictable. "Sarge," she said, her voice careful, "the mirage pattern does cycle. And there is a window. I can see it." Cole nodded slowly. "If we time our shots to that window, we might actually have a chance." Kane felt his authority crumbling like sandcastles against a rising tide. But beneath the anger and the fear, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly the lesson he needed to learn. Jordan watched the exchange with growing interest. These were good Marines, talented marksmen who had simply been let down by over-reliance on technology. With proper guidance, they could easily make these shots, could qualify for deployment, could go to Syria with the skills they needed to come home alive. But guiding them meant revealing herself, meant compromising 22 months of deep cover, meant risking a mission that extended far beyond this mountain range. In the distance, something glinted in the morning sun. A reflection off glass or metal, too far to be a threat, too deliberate to be random. Someone was watching with optics. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Jordan felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The feeling she had learned to trust in 12 countries and 63 missions. The feeling that said the game had just changed and the stakes had just gotten higher. But she looked at Whitaker, 24 years old and trying so hard to prove himself. At Harper, mother of two who needed this deployment to feed her family. At Cole, carrying guilt that wasn't his to carry. At Kane, wounded and scared and hiding it behind rage. Warriors who deserved better than to fail because no one had taught them to see. She made her decision. Tell you what, Jordan said, her voice taking on a different quality. Harder, more certain. The voice of someone who had made impossible decisions in impossible places. Give me one shot at your target. I'll prove what I'm talking about. Kane laughed, but it was a harsh sound without humor. Ma'am, this is a military weapons range. We can't just hand rifles to civilians. I have a rifle in my truck, Jordan replied calmly. Nothing fancy, just something I use for precision shooting. But I can demonstrate the principles I've been describing. This is getting ridiculous, Kane muttered, but his conviction was wavering. Dawson held up a hand. He was old enough and experienced enough to recognize when something extraordinary was unfolding. And every instinct he had developed over 28 years was telling him that this was one of those moments. Actually, Gunny, he said slowly, I'm curious to see what she has in mind. Ma'am, what kind of rifle are we talking about? A modified Remington 700, Jordan replied. Custom built for long-range work. It's accurate. And more importantly, I know exactly how it shoots. Dawson considered this. Technically, there was no regulation preventing a contractor from demonstrating civilian marksmanship skills, especially if it might help solve their current training problem. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Jordan met his eyes. Green meeting gray, operator recognizing operator, across a gulf of rank and regulation and classified missions that would never be spoken aloud. One shot, she said simply. At your target. If I miss, I'll apologize for wasting your time. If I hit, maybe you'll consider that there might be something to what I've been saying. The audacity of the proposal was staggering. A civilian contractor challenging Force Recon Marines at 1,700 yards, at a distance where even the best snipers had to account for the Earth's rotation. Ma'am, Cole interjected carefully, that target is at 1,700 yards. Most rifles aren't capable of that range. Most aren't, Jordan agreed, but mine is. Kane and Dawson exchanged glances. The situation had moved far beyond normal training protocols, but the potential learning opportunity was too valuable to dismiss. All right, Dawson said finally, but we do this properly. Safety protocols will be strictly observed. Of course, Jordan nodded. Give me just a minute. She walked toward the parking area with movements that were different now, more purposeful, more precise. The casual demeanor of a maintenance worker was being replaced by something else, something that moved with economy of motion that came from thousands of hours of training. Whitaker shook his head slowly as he watched her go. This is either going to be the most impressive thing we've ever seen or the most embarrassing moment of our careers. My money's on embarrassing, Kane muttered, but privately he wasn't so sure. There was something about this woman that didn't add up. Her technical knowledge, her bearing, her quiet confidence. Harper raised her binoculars. Guys, you need to see this. Jordan was opening what appeared to be a professional gun case from her vehicle. Even from a distance, it was clear that whatever was inside had been carefully secured and professionally maintained. That's not a standard case, Cole observed. That's military-grade equipment. Dawson felt a growing sense that this demonstration was about to become something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. Corporal Whitaker, contact base security and verify that contractor's clearance. I want to know everything about Jordan Blackwell. Yes, sir, Whitaker replied. But before he could make the call, Jordan was walking back. She carried the rifle case with movements that were too efficient, too tactical, the way an operator moved. Kane watched her approach and felt something cold settle in his gut. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to change everything. Jordan set the case down on a bench near the firing line. She looked at the 6 Marines watching her, at Dawson with his questions, at the range stretching out before her like a test. Somewhere in the distance, that glint of reflected sunlight flashed again. Someone watching, someone waiting. But right now, there was only one thing that mattered. She opened the rifle case. What lay inside spoke of midnight requisitions and custom machine work and precision that couldn't be bought off a shelf. Harper Donovan lowered her binoculars slowly. That's a $40,000 bill, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Minimum. The weapon gleamed in morning sunlight. Carbon fiber stock, match-grade barrel, Schmidt and Bender optic that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. This wasn't hunting equipment. This was what competitive shooters used, or operators. Dawson approached professional interest overriding protocol. Ma'am, this is quite an impressive weapon. Jordan lifted the rifle with movements too practiced, too efficient. She cradled it like something familiar, something trusted. Built it myself, she said matter-of-factly. Took about 2 years to get everything right. Shoot sub-minute of angle at 1,000 yards. Sub-minute of angle meant less than 1 inch of dispersion at 100 yards. At 1,700 yards, she was claiming her rifle could put bullets within 17 inches of aim point, assuming perfect conditions and execution. Kane felt his skepticism crumbling. The rifle was clearly the product of someone with extensive knowledge, deep knowledge, the kind that came from years of study and practice. But that raised questions about who exactly Jordan Blackwell was. All right, Dawson said, his voice carrying command weight. Range safety rules are in full effect. You'll have 1 shot. If you hit, we'll discuss techniques. If you miss, we return to standard protocols. Jordan performed a function check, inspected the bolt, checked the chamber, examined the firing pin. Systematic, professional, completed in under 30 seconds. Whitaker watched her hands and felt something click. Sarge, he whispered to Harper, that's not hobby-level familiarity. I know, Harper replied quietly. Everything about her is wrong. This isn't a groundskeeper who reads books. Before they could pursue that thought, Jordan was speaking again. Before I shoot, she said, her voice carrying unexpected authority, I want to make sure everyone understands what's about to happen. She pointed downrange. That target at 1,700 yards is positioned for a ricochet demonstration. Behind it at 2,000 yards, there's a steel plate. Beyond that, at 2,200 yards, there's a third target. The Marines followed her pointing, suddenly realizing the layout. 3 targets in a rough line separated by distances that would require perfect calculation. You're talking about hitting 3 targets with 1 bullet, Harper asked, disbelief hardening into challenge. Through ricochet ballistics, Jordan confirmed. If you understand angles, materials, and environmental conditions, it's possible to create a bullet path that connects multiple targets. Cole shook his head. Ma'am, that's practically impossible. The physics alone require calculating trajectory, surface hardness, deflection vectors, environmental factors, dozens of variables simultaneously. The physics are complicated but manageable, Jordan said gently. Angle of incidence, material hardness, bullet construction, environmental factors. It can be done. The casual way she said it made the claim even more shocking. Not boasting, just stating fact. Dawson realized this had moved beyond simple marksmanship. If she could accomplish what she described, it would represent skill that existed in the realm of legend. Ma'am, he said slowly, I need to ask directly, what is your background? What you're describing requires knowledge that isn't available in civilian programs. For a long moment, Jordan didn't answer. She looked at the targets, then back at the Marines, watching with fascination and suspicion. She had been invisible for 22 months, and now she was about to throw it away. I've had some training, she said finally, more than most. It was a non-answer that raised more questions than it resolved. But before Dawson could press, Jordan was moving toward the firing position. She set up with economy of motion that spoke of thousands of hours, shooting map position precisely. Rifle aligned, body at 45 degrees to line of fire, head position perfect, support hand cradling, not gripping. Everything textbook, everything professional. I need about 2 minutes to read wind conditions, she said, settling behind the scope. This shot requires timing the thermal cycles. The Marines watched as Jordan began what appeared to be meditation. Her eyes moved constantly, tracking Flag's grass mirage patterns. Reading the environment like language, gathering information, her brain was processing into a firing solution more complex than any computer could calculate. Flags at 400 yards. Steady northwest wind 14 miles per hour. 800 told a different story. Cross breeze from southwest, lighter 8 miles per hour. At 1200, the flags barely moved. At 1500, rising heat created shimmer that spoke of thermal currents invisible to technology, but visible to trained eyes. Thermal cycle completing, she murmured. Surface wind steady at 14 from northwest. Mid-level crosswind approximately 8 from southwest. High-level minimal 2 miles per hour. Whitaker grabbed his scope, trying to see what she saw. How can you tell just by looking? Practice, she replied. When you stop trusting machines and start trusting eyes, you see differently. Grass doesn't lie. Mirage tells truth. Heat from stone shows currents no computer can measure. Harper was taking notes, scribbling observations. This was education happening in real time. Knowledge that took years to accumulate condensed into moments. Dawson checked his watch. This had moved beyond normal protocols, but he couldn't stop it. His Marines were learning more in these minutes than in months of computer-assisted training. Wind cycle approaching convergence, Jordan announced. 30 seconds. She adjusted her scope, making minute corrections based on calculations in her head. Her breathing slowed. 4 counts in, hold 2, 6 out. The pattern snipers used worldwide to settle heart rate and steady control. 15 seconds. The range went silent. Even the wind paused, as if nature held its breath. Jordan's finger moved to the trigger. Light contact. Taking first stage. Feeling the break point. 5, 4, 3, 2. The Remington fired with a crack that echoed off mountains. Through scopes, the Marines watched the bullet's path. Slight disturbance in air, supersonic, invisible, but leaving trace in shimmer and pressure wake. 1,700 yards away, the first target rang. Solid hit, but instead of absorbing energy, the angle and hardness deflected it at precise vector. The bullet deformed but stable ricocheted at 17 degrees vertical, 23 horizontal. Clang, 2,000 yards, perfect hit. Calculated deflection. The bullet changed trajectory, responding to forces Jordan had predicted. Clang, 2,200 yards. The final target sang across the valley. 3 targets, 1 shot. Perfect execution. The silence was broken only by faint echo bouncing off distant walls. Good Lord, Dawson whispered. That's not possible. But it had happened. They had all witnessed something that existed in stories told in sniper schools, shots everyone heard about but no one actually saw. Until now. Jordan worked the bolt, ejecting the casing, engaging safety. She sat up with controlled movements. Wind reading, she said simply. When you understand environment, you work with it instead of against it. But the Marines weren't looking at her face. They were staring at something else. Something revealed when her shirt shifted during shooting. Underneath civilian clothing, they could see tactical vest, black nylon, moly webbing, and on that vest, partially visible, a patch that made Dawson's blood run cold. White letters on black DI, a Defense Intelligence Agency. Below that, a name tape, Blackwell. Below that, an encrypted device, black rectangular, the kind that didn't exist in civilian markets. Harper's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Whitaker's face went pale. Is that Defense Intelligence Agency? Cole finished hollowly. Kane felt the world tilt. 20 years and he thought he understood the game. He had been wrong. Jordan followed their stares and realized what was exposed. For a moment, genuine emotion flickered. Not fear, calculation running, high speed. Assessing, evaluating. Deciding how much truth to reveal. The decision was taken from her. In the distance, a sound that didn't belong. Rhythmic, mechanical. Growing louder. Thwop, thwop, thwop. Helicopter blades cutting thin air. Approaching fast, flying low. Tactical profile used for emergency insertions or urgent extractions. Whitaker grabbed his radio. Whiskey Jack range control, unscheduled air traffic approaching. Please identify. The response crackled with high-level authority. Whiskey Jack range, this is Sword 6-6 emergency priority with Colonel Hargrove aboard. Clear range immediately and prepare for command consultation. Colonel Hargrove, the base commander. A full bird colonel didn't make emergency flights unless something significant was happening. Jordan's face, calm throughout the demonstration, now showed genuine crack and composure. Eyes widened, breath caught. Hand moved unconsciously to the device, checking security. No, she whispered so quietly only Dawson heard. Not yet. Not like this. For the first time, Jordan Blackwell looked rattled. The operator's mask slipped, revealing someone who realized events were spiraling beyond control. The UH-60 Blackhawk appeared over the ridge. Desert tan, military markings. Descended toward the landing zone in controlled dive. Rotor wash kicked dust, forcing everyone to turn away. Before engines wound down, figures emerged. Colonel Diane Hargrove in full BDU, face-setting command and concern. The base sergeant major. Behind them, 2 individuals in civilian clothes with unmistakable federal agent bearing. Jordan watched them approach and felt 22 months of work crumbling. Operation Nightingale had been perfect, invisible, successful beyond parameters. She had gathered intelligence without anyone suspecting the quiet woman trimming roses was evaluating them. Now it was over, blown, compromised. because she couldn't watch Marines fail when she had knowledge to save them. What the hell? Kane muttered, confusion replacing anger. The group moved with urgency, walking directly toward the firing line, directly toward Jordan, eyes locked with focus of people who came for specific reason. Agent Blackwell, Colonel Hargrove called, while 50 yards away, voice carrying command that made everyone straighten. We need to talk, now. Agent Blackwell, not contractor, not civilian, not Ms. Agent. The word landed like artillery. Harper and Whitaker exchanged glances. They had stumbled into something beyond their clearance, beyond their understanding. Cole's mouth went dry. Did she say, Agent? Dawson approached Jordan. Ma'am, I think I owe you an apology. We had no idea. You weren't supposed to, Jordan replied quietly, edge of regret in voice. The cover was working perfectly until your Marines started having problems. She turned to face the command group, entire demeanor shifting. Humble worker gone, replaced by something else. Posture straightened, movements precise. Voice carried authority hidden for 22 months. 800 yards away, hidden in rocks, another figure watched through scope. Thomas Wade had been D1 15 years, worked with Jordan on 6 operations, watched her become one of agency's most valuable assets. And for 24 months, he'd been selling her location to foreign intelligence for $3 million. The Russians wanted Ghost. They'd been hunting her since Chechnya 3 years ago. They knew she was in California, embedded somewhere in military infrastructure, but couldn't find her, couldn't identify her, couldn't confirm which of hundreds of contractors was the operator who killed 6 of their intelligence officers. Until this morning, until she revealed herself, demonstrating skills no civilian should possess. Until she made the impossible shot, confirming her identity beyond doubt. Wade touched the encrypted phone. Russians would pay final installment within the hour, $3 million. Enough to disappear, enough to retire somewhere warm with no extradition. He watched Jordan at the firing line, Marines staring, Hargrove approaching with federal agents, and made the call. Confirmed, he said in Russian, barely whisper. Ghost is active. Agent Jordan Blackwell, Defense Intelligence Agency. Location Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, California. Initiating extraction. The voice was cold, professional. Payment transferring now. Your involvement complete. Recommend immediate vacation. Wade ended the call and began breaking down position. 6 hours to Mexico, 12 to Argentina, 24 hours to Wealthy and Anonymous. He didn't think about the woman he betrayed, didn't think about operations they ran together. Didn't think about the time she carried him 8 miles through hostile territory after he took shrapnel. Only money. Escape. Life far from here. At the firing line, Hargrove reached Jordan with federal agents flanking like guards. Sergeant Major took position behind, eyes scanning with tactical awareness from 3 decades. Hargrove's eyes swept rifle vest device, then to Marines' frozen faces showing shock and confusion. Agent Blackwell, Hargrove said, voice tight with controlled urgency. Your cover has been compromised. We need to relocate you immediately. Extraction helicopter standing by. Jordan's jaw tightened. Compromised how I've maintained protocol 22 months. One federal agent man in 40s with gray temples and hard eyes stepped forward. 3 hours ago, signals intelligence intercepted encrypted communications between Russian cell and unknown source within CONUS, discussing operation to identify and track DIA asset known as Ghost. Ghost, her operational call sign. Name earned in Chechnya when she eliminated 6 targets one night and disappeared like smoke. 40 minutes ago, agent continued, we intercepted second communication confirming Ghost location at this facility. Your demonstration may have provided confirmation to parties searching for you. Jordan felt ice water through veins. Compromised, not by accident, by someone who knew who she was, where she was waiting for confirmation. Someone inside. Traitor. She looked at Marines watching. Kane anger transformed to awe. Harper processing classified information she shouldn't hear. Whitaker young and out of depth. Cole like he'd seen magic in daylight. Sir, Dawson said carefully, addressing Hargrove, is Agent Blackwell in danger? Hargrove and Jordan exchanged looks speaking volumes. Operator to operator, professional to professional. There are operational concerns, Hargrove replied diplomatically. Nothing affecting base security. But Agent Blackwell's continued presence no longer advisable. Careful way of saying hostile intelligence actively hunting one of America's most valuable covert operators, and her location just burned. Jordan looked at targets she'd hit. 3 steel plates singing in distance. Evidence of skills that should have remained hidden. choice to help these Marines cost 22 months of work and might cost something more precious, her life. But she looked at Whitaker's face, saw him understanding wind reading that would keep him alive in Syria. Harper making notes informing her teaching for years. Kane's ego crumbling in way that might make him better leader. Price was high, but some things worth the cost. How much time, she asked Hargrove. 15 minutes to gather essentials, transport standing by. 15 minutes. To pack a life, abandon cover built over months. Run because staying meant dying. But first, one more thing. She turned to Marines still watching like she was creature from myth-made flesh. Before I go, she said, let me leave you with something. She walked to equipment locker, pulled out papers, sketched quickly. Hand moved with confidence of someone who'd drawn these diagrams 100 times in dozen countries, teaching warriors who needed to understand survival depended on seeing what computers couldn't measure. Windy reading isn't about equipment, she said, voice carrying authority. It's understanding air moves in layers like river, with currents at different depths. Computers measure surface, but bullets fly through three-dimensional space. The sketch showed range profile with arrows indicating wind flow at altitudes, thermal currents from heated surfaces, pressure differentials from terrain features, invisible architecture determining whether bullets found targets or disappeared. She pointed to sections: surface wind affected by ground heating, mid-level crosswinds influenced by valley shape, high-altitude flow usually steady but weak, thermal inversions reversing direction cyclically. Whitaker studied intently, a young face showing concentration of someone understanding this knowledge might mean difference between coming home alive or in flag-draped box. How do you read without instruments, he asked. Grass movement for surface wind, Jordan replied, tapping points. Mirage patterns for mid-level currents, dust for pressure differentials. Timing. Thermal cycles are predictable if you know what to look for. She handed him the sketch. Practice reading environment instead of computer. Equipment should confirm what eyes tell you, not replace what brain can calculate. Harper looked up, eyes meeting Jordan's. Ma'am, this is graduate-level meteorology applied to ballistics. Where did you learn this? For a moment, something painful flickered across Jordan's features. Ghost of memory with power to wound even after 9 years. Trial and error, she said quietly. When your life depends on impossible shots in impossible conditions, you learn to see differently. When mistakes cost lives, you make sure never to make those mistakes again. Casual mention of life or death reminded Marines they were talking to someone whose operational experience existed in realms they could only imagine. Precision demonstration hadn't been party trick. Glimpse into capabilities forged in places not on maps and operations never acknowledged. Hargrove checked watch with sharp movement. Agent Blackwell, we need to move, now. Copy that, ma'am. Jordan turned to Marines one final time, green eyes holding each face, memorizing. Gentlemen, you're good Marines with good instincts. Trust your training, trust your eyes. Stop overthinking equipment. You'll make those shots. She paused, added with evident sincerity, cutting through rank and regulation and classified nature of everything happening. It's been an honor working alongside you, even if you didn't know it. Dawson stepped forward, extending hand. Simple gesture, carrying weight. Operator recognizing operator. Warrior respecting warrior. Ma'am, it's been an honor having you here. I wish we could have known sooner who you really were. Jordan shook firmly, grip solid and sure. That was the point, Master Sergeant. But maybe it worked out. Your team learned something important today. Maybe they'll remember when it counts. As agents moved to escort Jordan toward helicopter, Kane found himself stepping forward. Question burning in gut since impossible shot finally forced out. Agent Blackwell, he said, voice rough. When you said you could hit 3 targets with 1 shot, had you actually done that before? Or was this morning the first time? Jordan paused. For a moment, professional mask slipped and something darker showed. Memory, experience. Things happening in shadows buried in classified files destroyed when she died. Gunnery Sergeant, she said slowly, there are things about my operational history I can't discuss. But I will say this. She met his eyes directly and he saw certainty coming from doing impossible things in impossible places. The shot I made this morning was significantly easier than some I've had to make in the field. Statement hung like gunsmoke, suggesting experiences and capabilities beyond normal human experience. Missions never discussed. Targets never acknowledged. Shots saving lives no one would know were in danger. Kane felt something crack inside. 20 years thinking he understood what elite looked like, what exceptional meant, what tip of spear was. He'd been wrong about all of it. Take care of yourself, Agent Blackwell, he said quietly. And thank you for everything. Jordan's expression softened slightly. Take care of them, Gunnery Sergeant. They're good Marines. They just needed someone to believe in them. As Group walked away, one federal agent fell into step beside Jordan. A man with gray temples and hard eyes who delivered news about compromised communications. His name was Marcus Reed Dipe, for 20 years, long enough to know when something felt wrong. Jordan, he said quietly, using first names suggesting familiarity. The intercepts mention an insider, someone who confirmed your location. Jordan's pace didn't change, but eyes sharpened. You think we have a traitor? I think someone inside DIA has been feeding your location to Russian intelligence, Reed replied, voice barely whisper. Timing too perfect, specificity too precise. They didn't just know Ghost was in California. They knew which base, which sector. They were waiting for confirmation, waiting for me to reveal myself. Jordan finished, pieces clicking with cold clarity. Question is who? Reed continued. Who knew about Operation Nightingale? Who had access to your cover legend? Who could track your movements? Jordan's mind raced through possibilities, running threat assessments and trust evaluations on everyone she'd worked with over 2 years. List of people knowing her real identity while undercover was short. Deliberately short. That was how deep cover worked. Colonel Hargrove knew. Reed knew, dying IA station chief in Los Angeles knew, and one other. Her original handler for Operation Nightingale. Agent who recruited, briefed, maintained quarterly check-ins. Thomas Wade. Realization hit like physical impact. Wade had been agency 15 years. Worked with her on 6 operations before Nightingale. Saved her life once in Karachi when asset turned hostile. Been the one she trusted most, an organization built on control paranoia. Wade, she whispered. Reed's expression confirmed what she feared. We flagged unusual financial activity in his accounts 4 months ago. Cryptocurrency transfers not matching salary or known assets. We've been watching, but needed proof. And now you have it, Jordan said bitterly, because he sold me out this morning. We intercepted his communications 17 minutes ago, Reed confirmed. He's 800 yards northwest preparing to extract. We have team moving to intercept, but he's good, Jordan. He'll see them coming. Jordan stopped walking. Hargrove and Sergeant Major halted beside her, reading tension, suggesting operational thinking at high speed. How long until your team reaches his position? Jordan asked. 6 minutes at current pace, Reed replied. He'll be gone in 4, Jordan said with absolute certainty. Wade trained at the farm same time I did. Knows extraction protocols, knows how we think. He'll see your team the moment they break cover. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? Jordan looked back at firing line where her Remington still sat on bench. At Marines watching this unfold with confusion. At mountains hiding traitor who sold American lives for cryptocurrency. I'm suggesting, she said slowly, Wade doesn't know I know. He thinks he's still invisible, still safe, still protected by same protocols protecting me. You want to take the shot, Hargrove said. Not question. 800 yards, Jordan confirmed. Northwest quadrant, moving target through broken terrain, high wind, thermal inversion. She paused. Significantly harder than the demonstration I just gave. Reed shook his head. Jordan, if you kill a federal agent, even a traitor, legal ramifications alone. I'm not going to kill him, Jordan interrupted. I'm going to stop him from running. Your team can make the arrest. She pulled out personal phone civilian device for groundskeeper cover. Open camera switched to maximum zoom. 800 yards away, barely visible in scope figure, moved through rocks. Dark clothing, tactical pack, moving with purpose toward vehicle concealed in wash. Thomas Wade, betrayer, traitor, man who'd been selling her location to enemies, wanting her dead. Jordan took 3 photos marking position and direction, then turned and walked back toward firing line with movements gone from maintenance worker to operator in heartbeat. Kane watched her approach with growing confusion. Agent Blackwell, I thought you were extracting. Change of plans. Gunnery Sergeant, Jordan replied, moving to rifle and beginning setup. I need to borrow your range for 90 more seconds. She settled into position with fluid efficiency, adjusted scope, checked wind indicators, began breathing patterns, slowing heart rate and steadying control. Harper understood first. She's taking a shot. At what? At someone who betrayed everything we stand for, Jordan said quietly, eye to scope now. Someone who sold American lives for money. Someone who needs to understand there are consequences. Through scope, she could see Wade more clearly, moving fast through broken terrain, checking back trail every 30 seconds. Professional, careful. Everything she'd taught him during their time working together. Everything except how to hide from someone who could read wind-like language and make shots beyond realm of normal capability. She calculated in head, 800 yards, 15-degree downward angle, surface wind 12 from west, but thermal inversion creating pocket of still air at 600, rising heat from rocks creating unpredictable eddies in last 200 yards of bullet flight. Computer on Whitaker's wrist would give solution, but it would be wrong. Computer couldn't see thermal layer, couldn't feel mountain breathing, couldn't know grass at 500 bending in direction, contradicting every flag, but she could see it, feel it. Read environment like book and language, only operators understood. What's the target? Dawson asked. Radio antenna on his tactical pack. Jordan replied, voice gone flat and emotionless. Voice of someone who made hard shots in hard places and was about to make another. I take out communications. He can't call for extraction. Your team picks him up before he reaches vehicle. At 800 yards, Cole breathed. Radio antenna is maybe 4 inches across. 5 inches, Jordan corrected. I've seen his pack, standard DIA issue. Antenna mounts on left shoulder strap. She made final scope adjustment. Settled breathing. Let heart rate drop to 50 beats per minute. Felt world contract to just her rifle target in space between. Firing, she announced. Remington barked once. Bullet flew through 3-dimensional space, rising and falling along parabolic arc accounting for gravity and air resistance and 100 other variables. Flew through wind layers trying to push it off course. Through thermal inversions creating turbulence invisible to technology. Through 800 yards of mountain air that should have made shot impossible. Bullet found radio antenna with precision defying probability. Impact wasn't dramatic. No explosion, no sparks. Just small puff of debris as antenna shattered, and Wade's ability to communicate with Russian handlers disappeared in an instant. Through scope, Jordan watched Wade spin at impact hand, going to pack body, dropping into cover with instincts of someone just shot at by professional. She worked bolt ejecting casing but didn't chamber another round. One shot was message enough. Target neutralize, she said calmly, engaging safety and sitting up. Radio destroyed. He's contained in Sector 7 Northwest Quadrant. Your team can pick him up in approximately 4 minutes. Reed was already on encrypted phone vectoring a REST team to Wade's location with coordinates Jordan just provided. Hargrove watched with expression, mixing professional respect with mild disbelief. 800 yards, Hargrove said quietly. 4-inch target in these conditions. 5-inch, Jordan corrected. And wind wasn't that bad once you accounted for thermal layer. Dawson had binoculars up watching as DIA agents converged on Wade's position from 3 directions. Watching as Trader realized he was surrounded. Watching as man who sold American secrets was taken into custody on American soil. I'll be damned, Dawson whispered. Jordan stood shouldering rifle expression, showing no satisfaction. No triumph, just weary acceptance of someone who just did something necessary but unpleasant. Agent Wade was my handler for Operation Nightingale, she said to Marines watching with varying degrees of shock. He knew my cover, knew my location, knew my mission parameters. And he sold all that to Russian intelligence for $3 million. The number landed like bomb. 3 million, Harper repeated, voice hollow, for one person's life. For Ghost's life, Jordan corrected. Russians have wanted me dead since Chechnya 2021. I cost them 6 intelligence officers and pipeline into Georgian separatist groups. They've been hunting me. Wade gave them everything except final confirmation. Which you provided this morning, Kane said, slowly, understanding dawning. When you made the impossible shot. When I chose to help you instead of maintaining cover, Jordan confirmed. Wade was watching, waiting for me to reveal skills no civilian should possess. I gave him exactly what he needed. Whitaker's face went pale. Ma'am, we didn't know if we had... You weren't supposed to know, Jordan interrupted gently. That was entire point of deep cover. I was invisible. Forgettable. Just another face no one paid attention to. She looked at each in turn. But I couldn't stay invisible and watch good Marines fail. I couldn't let you deploy to Syria without skills you needed to survive. Some things are worth more than operational security. Weight of what she sacrificed settled over range like frost. 22 months of work, critical intelligence operation, her own safety, all traded for lesson in wind reading that might save 6 lives she'd never see again. Reed's phone buzzed. He checked and nodded. Wade is in custody. They found $3 million in cryptocurrency on his phone. Russian intelligence contacts. Communication logs going back 24 months. We have everything. How many others did he burn? Jordan asked, voice tight. Reed's expression darkened. 4 other operatives we know of, 2 dead, 2 compromised and extracted. You were number 5. Marines stood in silence, trying to process classified information they shouldn't hear, trying to understand the scope of betrayal, trying to comprehend that woman they dismissed as janitor just took down traitor with single shot at 800 yards. Hargrove stepped forward, command voice cutting through shocked silence. Gunnery Sergeant Kane, you and your team will undergo mandatory debriefing on classified information exposure. You will not discuss what you witnessed with anyone outside your chain of command. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am, Kane replied automatically, years of discipline overriding confusion. But Hargrove wasn't finished. She turned to Kane with expression mixing severity with something that might have been respect. However, she continued, before Agent Blackwell's cover was compromised, she submitted final mission report on Operation Nightingale. That report contained assessments of every force recon team that trained at this facility over 22 months. She pulled out manila folder and opened it, reading from official document. Regarding Team 7-3, commanded by Gunnery Sergeant Victor Kane, Agent Blackwell wrote, Sergeant, Kane demonstrates exceptional dedication to his Marines and genuine passion for their success. While his leadership style can be abrasive and methods occasionally counterproductive, underlying commitment to warrior development is evident and commendable. Recommend advanced leadership training rather than disciplinary action. With proper mentorship, Kane has potential to become one of the Corps' most effective instructor cadre. Kane's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, shame, gratitude, disbelief. She recommended me for leadership school, he said, voice barely above whisper. After I treated her like garbage, Agent Blackwell's mission was to assess readiness and identify potential, Hargrove replied. She saw potential in you, Gunnery Sergeant. Question is whether you'll prove her right. Kane looked at Jordan, who was watching with expression holding no judgment, no anger. Just steady gaze of someone who'd seen beneath surface and found something worth salvaging. Ma'am, he said, voice rough with emotion he couldn't control. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be better, Jordan replied simply. Say you'll take what you learned today and teach it to others. Say you'll remember that excellence doesn't always look like what you expect. She walked toward him, and despite difference in heights, despite difference in ranks, it was clear who held moral authority in this moment. I had a brother, she said quietly, a voice carrying pain buried 9 years. Corporal Brennan Blackwell, United States Marine Corps. 22 years old, bright-eyed and full of fire, and absolutely certain he was going to change the world. She pulled photograph from pocket, worn at edges from being carried everywhere. Young Marine in dress blues grinning at camera with confidence of someone who thought he was invincible. August 2015. Afghanistan, she continued, voice steady but eyes showing grief time hadn't healed. His spotter gave bad wind call, thermal inversion just like conditions we have today. Brennan trusted his equipment, trusted technology. Computer said wind was steady at 8 miles per hour. She paused, and silence that followed was heavy with memory and loss. Computer was wrong. Bullet drifted 18 inches right, missed his target. An insurgent sniper he was shooting at didn't miss his return shot. Harper's hand went to the mouth, eyes filling with tears. Whitaker looked down, unable to meet Jordan's gaze. Cole felt throat tighten with sudden understanding. He died trusting equipment that couldn't see what environment Wade was trying to tell him, Jordan said. Died because someone didn't teach him to read wind with eyes instead of computer. She looked at each Marine in turn. That's why I broke cover today. That's why I compromised 22 months of work. Because I couldn't watch good Marines deploy without its skills needed to survive. I couldn't let Brennan's death be meaningless. Kane felt tears he hadn't shed in 20 years threatening to fall. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. If I had known... You couldn't have known, Jordan interrupted. But now you do. Now you understand why this matters. Why lesson is more important than technology. Why seeing environment is more critical than trusting computer. She held out photograph of Brennan. Keep this. Remember him. And when you teach other Marines, when you prepare other warriors for deployment, remember that skills you give them might be difference between them coming home alive or coming home in flag-draped coffin. Kane took photograph with trembling hands, staring at face of young Marine who died because someone hadn't taught him what he needed to know. Who trusted and died for that trust? I swear to you, Kane said, voice breaking. I swear on my life that I will teach them right. That I will make sure they know how to read wind, how to see environment, how to survive. Your brother's death won't be meaningless. I promise you that. Jordan nodded, satisfied. That's all I ask. Hargrove checked watch final time. Agent Blackwell, we are out of time. Extraction window closing. Jordan pulled diagram from Whitaker's hands and held it up for everyone. This wind reading technique, this understanding of thermal layers and environmental awareness. I want you to teach it. I want you to make it mandatory training for every sniper team in Marine Corps. She handed diagram to Dawson. Make it official. Make it doctrine. Call it whatever you want, but make sure every warrior who carries precision rifle learns to see wind the way I've shown you. Dawson took sketch with reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. Ma'am, what should we call this technique? Jordan smiled faintly. Call it the Blackwell Protocol, in memory of Corporal Brennan Blackwell, who died so others might learn. She shouldered rifle case and walked toward waiting helicopter without looking back. Professional to the end. Operator to last step, ghost disappearing into rotor wash and thin mountain air. Marines watched her go in silence. Watched as woman who'd been invisible 22 months became legend in space of 2 hours. Watched as helicopter lifted off carrying her toward whatever mission came next, whatever shadows she'd walk, whatever impossible things she'd do in places that didn't exist. The helicopter disappeared beyond ridge, leaving behind only dust and memories and 6 Marines whose lives had been changed forever. Kane looked down at photograph in his hands, at Brennan Blackwell's young face, at smiles suggesting invincibility and eyes that never imagined dying at 22. I'll make you proud, he whispered to photograph. Both of you, I swear it. Dawson turned to the team. All right, Marines, we have 36 hours to qualify. Let's apply what we just learned. Harper moved to firing position first, but instead of immediately checking her ballistic computer, she spent 3 full minutes observing. Wind flags, grass patterns, heat shimmer, the mirage at different distances. I can see it now, she said quietly. The thermal cycle, the way the air moves in layers. It's all there, we just weren't looking. Whitaker studied the diagram Jordan had drawn. Surface wind 14 from northwest, but mid-level is 8 from southwest. They're fighting each other. That's why our computer solutions were wrong. Cole timed the thermal cycle with his watch. 48 seconds, just like she said, and there's a 3-second window where everything aligns. Kane watched his Marines beginning to see the environment the way Jordan had taught them. All right, Harper, you're up first. Time your shot to the thermal window. Trust your eyes. Harper settled into position, controlled breathing, watching the grass at 1,000 yards, seeing the pattern Jordan had shown them, waiting, timing, feeling the mountain breathe, the grass stilled, the mirage aligned, the thermal cycle completed. Harper fired, 1,700 yards downrange. The steel target sang out with the clear, pure note of a solid hit. The sound echoed across the valley like a bell announcing victory. Harper sat up, eyes wide with disbelief. I hit it. I actually hit it. Because you stopped fighting the environment and started working with it, Dawson said. Agent Blackwell gave you the key. Now use it. One by one, each Marine took their turn. One by one, applying environmental awareness instead of relying solely on technology. One by one, they made shots that had been impossible 2 hours ago. By 1,400 hours, all 6 Marines had successfully qualified for deployment. The mission that had seemed impossible at sunrise was complete. Accomplished using techniques taught by a woman whose true identity they were only beginning to comprehend. 3 weeks later, January 2025, Syrian mountains 12 miles from the Turkish border. Corporal Ethan Whitaker pressed himself against cold stone, his breath forming clouds in the frigid mountain air. Below him, in a valley that wasn't supposed to have enemy activity, an insurgent sniper nest had materialized like a ghost. His team was pinned down. 3 Marines behind the rocks, unable to move without exposing themselves to fire from a shooter they couldn't locate. Whitaker, can you get a shot? Came the urgent voice in his earpiece. Staff Sergeant Reeves' team leader, voice tight with controlled tension. Whitaker scanned through his scope. 1,850 yards, thermal inversion conditions. Computer giving wind solution that he absolutely knew was wrong, because he could see what the computer couldn't. The grass at 1,000 yards bending left. The mirage at 1,400 flowing right. Thermal currents rising from sun-baked rocks, creating invisible architecture of air that no technology could measure. He thought of Agent Blackwell, of Brennan Blackwell, of the lesson taught in a California mountain range that was about to save American lives in a Syrian valley. I have the shot, Whitaker said calmly, but I need 90 seconds. He ignored his ballistic computer completely. Watched the environment instead. Timed the thermal cycle. Waited for the moment when chaotic air currents aligned into something predictable. Grass movement, mirage pattern. Dust drift. The mountain was breathing, and Whitaker could feel it. 45 seconds. 46. 47. The grass stilled. Whitaker fired. The bullet flew through three-dimensional space through thermal inversions and crosswinds and pressure differentials. Through 1,850 yards of mountain air that should have made the shot impossible. The enemy sniper concealed in rocks that provided perfect cover from every angle except one never heard the shot that ended his life. Target eliminated. Whitaker reported, his voice steady despite adrenaline flooding his system. Area secure. As his team moved to safety, Whitaker whispered words meant for ghosts who would never hear them. That was for Brennan and for you, Agent Blackwell, wherever you are. 2 months later, March 2025, Marine Corps Base, Quantico, Virginia. Staff Sergeant Harper Donovan stood at the front of a classroom packed with 40 Marine recruits, all eager faces waiting to learn what she had to teach. On the overhead projector behind her, a laminated diagram. The same sketch Jordan Blackwell had drawn in California dirt, now official Marine Corps training material. The Blackwell Protocol, read the header in bold letters. Mandatory environmental wind reading for all USMC sniper programs. What you're about to learn, Harper began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been transformed by what she was teaching, isn't in any computer program. It isn't in any ballistic calculator. It's the skill that will keep you alive when technology fails you. She pointed to the diagram. Surface wind, mid-level crosswinds, high-altitude flow, thermal inversion layers. Your bullets fly through all of it. And if you can't see it, you can't hit it. A young recruit raised his hand. Staff Sergeant, where did this protocol come from? Harper's expression softened with something that might have been reverence. From someone who understood that the best technology in the world can't replace trained eyes and a warrior's instinct. From someone who saved lives by believing in Marines when they didn't believe in themselves. She didn't mention names, didn't reveal classified operations. But in her voice was the unmistakable tone of someone who had been touched by excellence and was determined to pass that gift forward. Now, Harper continued, let me show you how to read what the environment is trying to tell you. 4 months later, May 2025, Advanced Leadership School, Quantico. Gunnery Sergeant Victor Kane stood before an auditorium containing 200 NCOs from every branch of the Marine Corps. On the screen behind him, a video recreation of the impossible shot played in slow motion. 3 targets, 1 bullet, physics-defying probability. What you just witnessed, Kane said, his voice carrying weight of hard-earned wisdom, was more than exceptional marksmanship. It was a lesson in humility, in respect, in recognizing excellence even when it comes from unexpected sources. He paused, letting the words sink in. I almost destroyed my career because I couldn't see past a uniform, Kane continued. I looked at someone I assumed was just a janitor and dismissed everything she had to offer. I was wrong, and that mistake almost cost my Marines their lives. He clicked to the next slide. A quote in simple block letters, excellence doesn't always look like what you expect. Your job as a leader is to recognize it wherever it appears. When the person who made that shot, Kane said, taught me more about leadership in 2 hours than I learned in 20 years of service. Not through lectures, not through reprimands, but by demonstrating that true professionals measure success by the warriors they save, not the recognition they receive. A hand went up in the audience. Gunnery Sergeant, what happened to the person who made that shot? Kane's expression showed something that might have been sorrow mixed with pride. That's classified. What I can tell you is that they're still serving, still saving lives, still doing impossible things in impossible places, and we'll never know most of what they've sacrificed for us. He looked out at 200 faces, seeing in them the future of the Corps. Your assignment, Kane said, is to be the kind of leader who recognizes excellence even when it doesn't come with rank or credentials. To be the kind of NCO who listens when anyone has knowledge that can save your Marines. To be better than I was. In his office after the lecture, Kane sat alone with a letter he had written but would never send. Pages of handwriting pouring out gratitude and shame and transformation to someone who would never read them. At the bottom he had written, you saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You defended me when I had given you every reason not to. You taught me that real strength isn't in being right, it's in being willing to learn. The Blackwell Protocol is now mandatory across all service branches. Thousands of warriors will learn to see the way you taught us to see. Your brother's sacrifice wasn't meaningless. Your sacrifice wasn't meaningless. I've trained 1,847 NCOs so far. Every one of them carries your lesson forward. Every one of them knows that excellence can come from anywhere, and leadership means recognizing it. Semper Fidelis, Victor Kane. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a leather journal with dozens of others he had written over the months. Never sent, never read by their intended recipient, but the act of writing brought peace, and the lessons contained in those pages were being lived every day by Marines across the globe. 6 months after the impossible shot. June 2025, Prague, Czech Republic. Jordan Blackwell sat in a safe house overlooking Wenceslas Square, watching tourists and locals move through golden afternoon light. She looked different now. Shorter hair, different color. Contact lenses changing her eye color from green to brown. New legend, new identity, new mission. On the desk beside her, a single photograph. 6 Marines standing beside 3 steel targets in a California mountain range. Whitaker grinning, Harper with her arm around Cole. Kane standing slightly apart, but his expression showing something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Jordan allowed herself 30 seconds to look at it, to remember, to feel something other than the cold calculation that kept her alive in hostile territory. Then she placed the photograph in a secure box with others from operations that officially never happened. Sealed it, locked it away. Her encrypted phone buzzed. Target confirmed: Vincent Cross, former DIA operative, your mentor and handler from 2009 to 2015. Location: Prague Sector 7. Grid reference: 24 Alpha. Intel compromise critical. Cross is selling complete Blackwell protocol training materials to hostile intelligence services. Techniques being disseminated to enemy sniper programs. Threat assessment: immediate and severe. American lives at risk. Authorization: terminal resolution approved at your discretion. Timeline: 72 hours maximum. Exfil, standing by on your command. Jordan read the message twice, each word landing like physical impact. Vincent Cross, the man who had recruited her into DIA, who had trained her, who had become a father figure when her own father had died, who had held her when she cried after Brennan's death and told her that the best way to honor her brother was to make sure other warriors didn't die the same way. Vincent Cross, who had apparently decided that the Blackwell protocol created from her brother's sacrifice was worth selling to America's enemies. She pulled up surveillance photos. Cross at a cafe meeting with a known Russian intelligence officer. Cross entering a building owned by a Syrian front company. Cross with a laptop containing classified training materials. The evidence was irrefutable. Jordan moved to her equipment case, custom rifle. Different from the Remington she'd left in California, but equally precise. She began the ritual of preparation that she had performed hundreds of times. Check the weapon, verify the scope, calculate the shot. But this time her hands trembled. 700 meters from this building to the cafe where Cross would meet his contact tomorrow at 1400 hours. Clear line of sight. Predictable wind patterns. A shot she could make in her sleep. A shot that would end the life of the man who had made her who she was. Her phone buzzed again. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. Agent Blackwell, you don't know me, but I was in Corporal Whitaker's team in Syria. Your protocol saved my life last month. Thermal inversion conditions, just like you described. I made the shot because of what you taught. My wife is pregnant with our first child. I'm going to be a father because of you. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you. Corporal James Martinez, USMC. Jordan stared at the message, at words from a Marine she'd never met. A life saved by knowledge passed forward. A child who would have a father because she had broken her cover to teach warriors how to see. She thought of Brennan, 22 years old, never got to be a father, never got to pass forward what he'd learned. She thought of Cross selling that knowledge to enemies who would use it to kill Americans. Marines like Martinez, warriors like Whitaker. Her hands stopped trembling. She chambered around. The next evening, Vincent Cross sat at an outdoor cafe in Prague's Old Town, waiting for his contact. A Russian intelligence officer who would pay 2 million euros for complete Blackwell protocol training materials. Enough money to disappear forever. He never saw the woman on the rooftop 700 meters away. Never saw her settle into position with a rifle that had been built for impossible shots. Never knew that his former student, the woman he had trained, mentored, and claimed to care about, was behind the scope. The shot was perfect. Through the center mass. Instant incapacitation. The laptop containing classified materials secured by Czech police working with U.S. intelligence within 2 minutes. But Vincent Cross's last conscious thought as he fell was seeing a figure on a distant rooftop. A woman with a rifle. A silhouette he recognized despite the distance. Jordan, he whispered. And then darkness. On the rooftop, Jordan worked the bolt, ejected the casing, watched it tumble through afternoon light, watched it land on concrete with a soft metallic sound. She didn't feel triumph, didn't feel satisfaction, just the hollow ache of necessity, of doing what had to be done to protect warriors who would never know they'd been in danger. Her phone buzzed. Reed's voice. "Extraction ready. You have 5 minutes." "Copy," Jordan replied. Her voice was steady, professional, the voice of Ghost. But as she packed her equipment, she allowed herself one moment, one breath, one whispered word for the man who had trained her and then betrayed everything she stood for. "I'm sorry, Vincent, but some things are worth more than money. Some legacies are worth protecting, even from the people who helped create them." She disappeared into Prague's winding streets, another operation complete, another impossible thing done in an impossible place. And somewhere in Syria, Corporal Martinez was writing a letter to his wife about the child they would name after a Marine who died in Afghanistan, about a legacy of sacrifice that rippled forward through time, saving lives in ways that would never be counted. 1 year after the impossible shot, December 2025, the following text appeared on classified screens across the United States military intelligence community. Official memorandum from Commandant of the Marine Corps to all personnel the Blackwell Protocol, mandatory integration, and effective immediately. The Blackwell Protocol for environmental wind reading and ballistic assessment is hereby designated as mandatory training for all USMC sniper programs, force recon teams, and precision marksman courses. Since implementation, 847 successful long-range engagements attributed to Blackwell Protocol techniques, 73% improvement in first-shot hit rates in complex environmental conditions, 0 friendly fire incidents in situations involving thermal inversion, previously 12 incidents annually. The protocol has been adopted by U.S. Army Special Forces Navy SEAL teams and Air Force pararescue units. Former Gunnery Sergeant Victor Kane, retired May 2025, trained 1,847 NCOs in Blackwell Protocol methodology before retirement. Current assignment, Senior Civilian Instructor, Advanced Leadership School. Staff Sergeant Harper Donovan, promoted to Gunnery Sergeant, currently Chief Sniper Instructor, Marine Corps Base Quantico. Corporal Ethan Whitaker, awarded Navy Cross for actions in Syria, January 2025. Currently assigned to Marine Corps Scout Sniper School as Junior Instructor. Sergeant Garrett Cole, selected for Marine Corps Embassy Security Group, currently assigned to High Threat Environment Diplomatic Protection. In memory of Corporal Brennan Blackwell, USMCK, IA, Afghanistan. August 2015, whose sacrifice led to the development of techniques that have saved countless American lives. The location and status of the individual who developed the Blackwell Protocol remains classified. Semper Fidelis. But in the places where such things mattered, whispers circulated. Stories passed from operator to operator, legends told in hushed voices in the kinds of bars where quiet professionals gathered. Stories about Ghost, about impossible shots made in impossible places, about a woman who walked in shadows and saved lives that no one knew were in danger, about the kind of hero who never wanted recognition and would never receive it, the kind who measured success not in medals or promotions, but in warriors who came home alive, the kind whose legacy would outlive them by generations. And in a safe house in a city that would never be named, Jordan Blackwell received a final message. Operation Nightingale. Final assessment. Mission success. Despite compromise, intelligence gathered over 22 months has led to identification of 17 training deficiencies, 3 security vulnerabilities, and 1 traitor neutralized. Blackwell Protocol now saving lives globally. Recommend Presidential Medal of Freedom classified. Agent response required. Jordan typed 3 words. Decline. Brennan's Medal. Because some heroes serve for honor, not recognition. Some warriors fought for legacy, not glory. Some professionals measured success by the lives they saved, not the medals they received. And somewhere in the California mountains, wind moved through ranges where Marines trained, where they learned to see what computers couldn't measure, where they practiced techniques that would keep them alive in places their families would never know they'd been, where a legend had been born from grief and sacrifice and the choice to risk everything for warriors who deserve better. The impossible shot that changed everything. The woman who made it and then disappeared. And the legacy that would save lives for generations to come. Epilogue. Post-credits 2 years later, December 2027, a different military base. A different mountain range. An elderly man in maintenance coveralls trimmed hedges near a rifle range where a new generation of Marines struggled with long-range qualification. 67th Miss, a young lieutenant muttered frustration evident in every word. The computer says these solutions should be perfect. The elderly man set down his pruning shears and walked slowly toward the safety barrier. Excuse me, Lieutenant, he said, his voice carrying the weight of years and wisdom. I couldn't help but notice your thermal readings are being affected by inversion. The lieutenant turned irritation flashing across his face at civilian interference. But the elderly man smiled knowingly. Son, I taught the woman who wrote the Blackwell Protocol. Let me show you what she taught me. The lieutenant's eyes widened. You knew Ghost. Knew her, the old man said, pulling out a faded photograph. A young woman standing beside three steel targets, eyes showing determination and grief and absolute certainty. I recruited her. He looked at the mountains, at the wind moving through invisible layers, at the young Marines who needed to learn what technology couldn't teach. Her name was Jordan Blackwell, he said quietly, and she believed that the best way to honor the fallen was to make sure the living had every tool they needed to survive. He handed the lieutenant a piece of paper, a diagram drawn in careful detail. The same lesson that had been taught in a California mountain range and was now being passed forward again. Now, the old man said, let me teach you how to see, because legends never died. They just found new students to teach, and the legacy continued, one impossible shot at a time.